Well, good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Jay Sattler. I'm a partner with Bloom Shapiro and the chair of the board of the Bristol Chamber of Commerce. Before we get into tonight's program, I'd like you to ask you all to stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thank you very much again for being here. I'd like to thank our sponsors for tonight's event, Webster Bank and also St. Paul High School for allowing us to use this facility, as they've done so graciously in the past. The Bristol Chamber of Commerce is very proud to host tonight's event, as we've done in the past. This is, in our opinion, a critical program allowing us to connect the dots between the mission of the Chamber and the vision that many of our candidates have. That's important for them to have yet another platform to share before we get into the vote. What is that, just about 2 weeks from now, I think, right? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Day's getting near. And I understand we have a very important baseball game tonight, so we will move on with the agenda, right? No West Coast. I actually just flew in from the West Coast. I can assure you there were not many Red Sox hats in the West Coast airport. So to just get things started, it's my pleasure to turn the microphone over to the President and CEO of Bristol Hospital and the co-chair of our legislative committee, Kurt Barwis. Kurt.
So it's really my pleasure and excitement to be here and welcome to everybody that's here tonight. Just kind of a few words from me. I've been involved in chambers of commerce, and I was just thinking about this back to when I started my career in 1986 in Philadelphia, and then in Northern Maryland and Southern Maryland, and then coming here to Connecticut, to Bristol, Connecticut. And I have to tell you, this is the best chamber that I've ever been involved with, bar none. I mean, the events, and especially this event where we bring the candidates in. We had the honor of having the last gubernatorial debate that was extremely well attended at the AquaTurf. And here tonight again, we're going to do it again. And personally, I come to these things not just to be part of the program, co-chair of the committee, because I learned so much from these debates and these interactions. And so I really do believe the value that the Chamber delivers to this community, to the business community, and to others is just extraordinary. And Cindy, you do an amazing job. I don't know where you are out there, but thank you. Thank you very much. So enjoy tonight. I know we're up against the timeline, so I'm not going to say much more. Thank you again for being here tonight. I'm supposed to introduce Paul, my partner in crime, so I apologize. Paul, as you know, is just an amazing facilitator of these debates and has done an extraordinary job of keeping on time. And I see Chris is over there with the time clock. He just enjoys hitting that buzzer. So, Paul Moore, back there. Sorry, keep going.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much, and good evening. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Please, I'd like you to join me in welcoming our candidates for our state representative forum. From the 77th District, Kevin Fuller and Cara Pavalock. From the 78th District, Whit Betts and Alan Marko. And from the 79th District, David Rackliffe and Chris Ziogas. Candidates, on behalf of the Chamber and the Regional Legislative Action Committee, we thank you for running for office. We thank you for having the courage to be out there, to listen to our points of view, and to give us an opportunity to ask you some questions and to help us understand how you would serve the great city of Bristol and the surrounding areas. A little bit about our format this evening. Each candidate will be given the opportunity to give a 90-second opening statement. We have timers. Chris Boyle from Bristol Hospital is our official timekeeper. Chris will start once you're introduced and asked to start. There is a timer on 2 tables there. The green light will start at 1 minute and 30 seconds. At 30 seconds, that light will turn yellow. That is your 30-second timer countdown. When that light turns red, you will be interrupted if you are in the middle of a sentence, and we move on to the next candidate. We don't do that to be rude or inconsiderate. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We do that to be fair and equitable to all candidates, to also respect the audience's time as well, and yes, to make sure we make the start of the Red Sox game. I guarantee you we will be out of here on time. Each district will be given 3 questions. Each district will be given a different set of questions, but both reps in that district will be asked to answer the same questions. The questions have been developed by the Regional Legislative Action Committee, which consists of business leaders from the community. We also this time solicited feedback from the community, from business leaders and the general public as well. So some of that feedback has been incorporated into our questions as well. It's very important that you understand that these candidates have not been presented with the questions in advance. So there has been no advanced preparation on the specific questions. They will each have 90 seconds. We're not making a Red Sox. They'll each have 90 seconds to answer the question, and then we will give the candidates an opportunity for closing statement. So let's begin with our opening statements. We will go in order of district and in alphabetical order. So up first with an opening statement from the 77th District will be Kevin Fuller.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Fuller. I'm running in the 77th District. Been in Bristol most of my whole life. Worked for the Bristol Board of Ed for the last 25 years. I just retired June 1st, and that was one of the reasons I decided to jump into the race, because I now have plenty of time to spend up in Hartford, which is what you need to get things done up in Hartford. I was the technology tech for the board. I worked with all the teachers and all the kids. Saw firsthand a lot of stuff going on that we need to address to make sure that we have enough funding in education to help all these students. There's a lot of areas that I'd like to see us get money to go into workforce training, more development. We have a lot of kids in the school system that are not really college ready, but that doesn't mean that they are just going to be left out in the wash. We got to train these kids to get jobs so they can make a nice living for themselves. Outside of that, I think what we really want to do is I want to look at raising the minimum wage, earned family leave, and the only reason we're going to get a lot of this stuff done is if we work together as a whole body. We have to be bipartisan. We have to work together. One of the reasons we have to work together is because we're representing Bristol. If we don't work together, we're doing a disservice to the people that elected us. So one of the things you will get out of me is bipartisanship.
My name is Cara, and I am in the current representative for the 77th District of Bristol. I'm in my 2nd term, seeking a 3rd, and I currently sit on the Education Committee, the Insurance, Real Estate, and also the Environment Committee. I was raised in Bristol, attended St. Paul and Emmanuel Lutheran School. I am an attorney specializing in the areas of bankruptcy, foreclosure defense, and family law. In addition to being a small business owner here in town, I'm also a wife and a new mother to my son Leo, who is not here tonight. As you can tell from our signs, our theme this year is It's Time to Fix Connecticut. And we chose that because the same party has run Connecticut for the last 38 years, and now we're facing our second $5 billion deficit. No one ever told me before I ran that there are 187 legislators making decisions about our wallets and our kids' futures. Every legislator gets 1 vote, and I make sure that my vote counts. And it doesn't give bailout money to Hartford or appoints new judges that there's no courtrooms for. The cost of these policies falls on us, the working class. It's time we stop electing people who put this burden on our shoulders. It's time we fix Connecticut.
Thank you. To the 78th District, Whit Betts.
Thank you. I look at this election as a job evaluation of the policies and the job performance of Governor Lavoie and the Democratic majority who have been in charge of the government for about 8 years now straight. And in going around and campaigning, I've been asking people what they thought of the job that was being done. And I read a letter recently that I'm going to read that I think summed up many of the things I had heard. And it's, quote, "Higher taxes, businesses leaving the state, and our children moving away from their families to find employment and affordable places to live. The net result is Connecticut has fallen from one of the best places in which to live and to do businesses to one of the worst. Voters have complained to me about being ignored by the governor and the Democratic majority, and the case in point is despite the vigorous opposition of the empty Magic Busway, which was built and last year had an operating loss of $22 million. Now they're talking about putting in tolls, which I call Magic Busway 2.0, over the strong opposition of taxpayers. Voters are angry and frustrated, and I think it's time to elect new leaders. It's time to fix Connecticut.
Thank you. Alan Marko.
Thank you. I want to take a minute to tell you a bit about myself. I've been a Connecticut resident all my life. I grew up in Milford, went to UConn at Storrs, and then to UConn Law School. I practiced law in the Waterbury and Wolcott area, and then had an office here in Bristol. After about 20 years of practicing law, I made the decision to change careers, and I went through what is known as the alternate route to certification program, and that's for folks who are making a change of careers to go into teaching. After completing that, I became a high school teacher. I taught history, primarily U.S. history, and civics in Watertown High School, and I did that for 15 years and retired from that a couple years ago. I have lived in Bristol for about 38 years now with my wife, Karen. We had 2 children who are graduates of Bristol Central, and they both live in Connecticut as well. My son lives in New Milford, my daughter in Torrington. I have 5 grandchildren, and they are a big motivator for me in running for the legislature. I want to make sure that they have the opportunities to live and work in Connecticut and enjoy this beautiful state. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to the 79th District, David Radcliffe.
Thanks, Paul. Good evening. I'm a lifelong resident of the state of Connecticut, and for the last 23 years have called Bristol home. I can remember when Connecticut was the gold standard for quality of life and income statistics. But since the installation of the income tax, we have been on a steady decline, as a legislature dominated by one party has spent and taxed such that Connecticut is now the bottom of the 50 states in nearly all meaningful measures. The last 8 years have been marked by 2 of the largest tax increases in the state's history, and yet our financial position has worsened. My opponent believes that Governor Lavoie has done a good job, and yet 80% of the state's residents disagree. My opponent believes raising taxes is a way to close the budget gap. He believes in tolls. Where is his concern for controlling spending? Besides the obvious financial issues, there is a significant crisis of confidence in our government, and citizens, young and old, and businesses, along with their jobs, are demonstrating that concern by leaving. The next governor and legislature will be faced with the daunting task of reversing this trajectory, and it will take discipline, flexibility, and perseverance to achieve a meaningful recovery. It's time to fix Connecticut.
Thank you. Chris Ziogas.
Thank you all for being here tonight with us. I'm in my first term. I've had a long history of public service in Bristol, zoning commission, city council, board of finance, chairman of the Democratic Town Committee. My term in Hartford has been most enlightening, and I was very, very successful, I thought, in terms of learning the system. I was able to bring back some money to Bristol in the form of funding for the Memorial Boulevard School. And in addition to which, more important was I learned the process in Hartford. I can be an effective voice in Hartford. I did not seek any endorsements from any unions or any other advocacy groups. I'd like to tell you that I'll adopt the slogan from Mike Bogoslawski, I'm nobody's man but yours. some people say I'm controversial. I say I went to Hartford to make the tough votes for Bristol. I didn't go there. If I wanted to be popular, I'd sell ice cream. But, so I'll, no offense, Kevin. So I just wanted to say, the experience that I have there today is valuable to Bristol, and we ought to repeat that by sending me back.
Thank you. So our first question is for the representatives of the 78th District. As you know, the 2018-2019 budget was delayed until after municipal budgets were enacted. Many municipalities base their budgets and promises from the state on education aid, LoCIP funding, pilot and other funding for other important programs. And this year, after municipal budgets were enacted, they were reduced or eliminated in the state budget. What's your position on funding for municipalities, and do you favor increasing, decreasing, or keeping it the same? Whit Betts.
Thank you. Well, a couple of responses. One is, if what we did had happened in the private sector, we would have been fired. People in municipalities and in schools, they make their budgets and they depend on what the state government provides them. The fact that we did not do it in the timely way and in a constitutional way left them hanging and really caused a lot of anxiety to a lot of people, and that really is a mistake. As public officials, we have to do that, and it was very regrettable they had to wait that long. My position is not so much whether you increase, decrease, or stabilize. It's more the idea that what we say you're going to get. Changing your mind in midstream is totally unfair and totally unacceptable because people's budgets are based on what we promise them. I think what we do is we put too many unfunded mandates on them, and I think that that's a way we could help them get more money and be more efficient in meeting their mission. And that's something I would like to really pursue in the upcoming session.
Thank you. Alan Marko.
I also agree with Whit that the process that played out this last year was disgraceful. There is no reason not to reach a budget decision in time for states, or rather municipalities and school boards to set their budgets. And when I was teaching, I was involved in contract negotiations. And a lot of that comes down to what money is available through the funding from the state. And then if that rug is going to be jerked out from under towns and schools at the last minute, that is no way to run government. And so I would urge the governor, when I am elected, to make sure that we get those decisions made early and on time. I'd also be looking at the way that that funding is parceled out. There is a formula, and I think that there are some areas for adjustment in that formula because the wealthier towns do not have the need that the less wealthy towns, the towns that don't have the grand list that a Greenwich or Stamford have. And so I would look to adjust that. But as far as timing, we definitely have to have our job done so that local officials can do their job.
Thank you. Next question is for the candidates in the 79th District. Should you be elected, what do you believe are the top 3 priorities for the state legislature in 2019-2020? David Rackliff.
The top 3 priorities, I believe, are getting the fiscal stability under control. The spending is out of control. We have ways to improve get the agencies to be consolidated. We can look at working with not-for-profits. We can do quite a bit to improve the efficiency of the government. So that would be my first priority, is looking at ways we can cut the cost of government operations. My second priority would be to work with the members across the aisle. I'm a diehard Yankee fan, and I'm rooting for the Red Sox this year. So I think I can demonstrate that I can work across the aisle with my colleagues on the other side to get to some consensus on finding a way to make the government more efficient and more responsive to the people of the state. And lastly, I think we need to do something about the bonding. Bonding is something that's out of control. I think in Governor Malloy's last year of his office, which is now, he's bonded up to $2.3 billion. We need to reduce the bonding that's going on at the state level and cut the credit card use so that we're not mortgaging our futures for the rest of our families.
Thank you. I applaud your courage of admitting that you're a Yankee fan to this crowd. Chris Ziogas.
I think the major issue I find when I talk to people is primarily they want to control the budget. They want us to go in Hartford and they want us to put some management on top of this budget that seems in their estimation to be out of control. And in many respects, the budget's pretty tight. There's a lot of wrangling that goes on before any budget that's finalized. And in this past session, it was the Democrats and the Republicans versus the governor. There was a budget that was passed that was primarily Republican, got vetoed, got sent back, and then we had a bipartisan budget. 4 months later, was it? I don't know, sometime in like almost November. You have to understand that the dynamics in Hartford are very contentious. Very little that the Republicans say is accepted by the Democrats, and likewise, the Democrats don't have much respect for what the Republicans have to offer. And our budget is a consequence of that. We are on the edge of better times. I think that we need to be confident that some of the programs that have been put into place are beginning to pay off. We're seeing unemployment at new low levels. We see opportunity coming back to the state. There are people leaving the state, but there are people coming back to this state. They are moving back into Connecticut. There is light. It's during our darkest moments that we must focus to see the light. And I think we have opportunity ahead of us.
This next question is for the representatives in the 77th district. It's no secret Connecticut is in a fiscal crisis. Some say we have a revenue problem, and others say we have a spending problem. What is your position? Do we have a spending problem or a revenue problem? And what are your solutions for your stated position? Kevin Fuller.
I think we have both. We are spending, we have to get that under control, and we have to bring in more revenue. Unfortunately, a lot of times I think Connecticut seems to be the 53rd state in the union. We're a day late and a dollar short on a lot of these things. I think knowing that one of the revenue streams I'm thinking of is sports betting. They knew it was coming down. They should have been proactive. Went and talked to the Indians, sit down and talk to them. New Jersey implemented sports betting. In the first month, they pulled in $40 million. Right now, around here, the only one making money on that is everybody on the internet, different DraftKings and whatever the other ones are out there. So there's a revenue stream right there. Unfortunately, we've missed a lot of deadlines on a lot of these sports that are happening right now. So first of all, we have to look for the revenue. That's one way. Everybody talks about tolls. I'm not sure I'm for tolls completely yet, but I'm not against them. I want to see what the whole package looks like first. If it's going to make the gas tax go away, then I would be for them, because I think by eliminating the gas tax, that helps everybody. You know, I think what is it, like 25 cents or whatever, but if you can get rid of that, that'll help everybody. So I think it's both problems right now.
Thank you. Cara, Pavalock, D'Amato.
And I'd have to disagree, probably about 99% with my opponent, only because I agree with as far as revenue goes, that sports betting and also collecting sales tax on online vendors could be improved by far. But without a doubt, the other 98 to 99% is that we have a spending problem. I'm going to give you a few examples on some of the things that we spend money on and bills that we passed this year. We spent $54 million to bail out Hartford. The Citizens Election Program, millions of dollars. And this goes towards candidates, towards all those mailers you get. We spent, UConn did, $480,000 on color blocks for their lobby. We have a full copy center, basically staples within every courthouse. so people can get copies for free, use different equipment for free, things that in other states aren't provided. They charge $1 a copy. We also have judges that we can't afford, to the cost of $9 million. Our toll study started out at $5 million during session, and overnight, all of a sudden, cost $10 million. The other bill that we passed was full-time salaries and benefits for grad students that work 20 hours a week. To say that we can't cut spending is completely ridiculous. We have plenty more. I only wanted to list a few.
Thank you. The next question is for the representatives in the 79th District. The Chamber of Commerce Legislative Action Committee believes that one of the paths to prosperity for our state is a focus on economic development and high-wage job growth. As a state representative, how will you promote economic development and high-wage job growth in the Bristol area? Chris Ziogas.
The focus of a lot of attention, especially of the Connecticut Commission on Fiscal Stability and Economic Growth, that I think everybody here is familiar with, but if the public isn't, it was a nonpartisan group that put together a study on terms of what they thought could be done to make Connecticut better. And job growth was one of the primary elements of their analysis. And they were talking about human capital. And we have spent a lot of time in Hartford talking about human capital and how to develop that. Children coming out of, not children, but young people coming out of high school are looking for alternative avenues into careers. We are trying to promote that in terms of giving them avenues through the community college system, especially in some of the trade schools, to give them avenues in the skilled workforce that EB and Pratt and the major employers in this state are begging for. We have a wealth of jobs available and not enough people to fill them. And we need to do that to drive the economy forward. Another element that you do to improve this state, nobody wants to talk about it favorably, I like tolls. I think we can get tolls, we can do them at a net cost to the citizens of Connecticut at almost zero. Dave disagrees, he's given some bad information out we can talk about later. But the fact remains that tolls are an avenue for us to grow this state, and the business community tells us that all the time.
Thank you. Dave Rackliff.
Well, I think the thing that's missing out there is that we have job training, but we're not aligning our job training with the jobs that are becoming available. We have a number of jobs that will become available and no one to fill the jobs. So we need to be focusing on job training. We need to reduce regulations. Regulations are crippling small businesses and even larger businesses just because of the unfunded mandates that they're put under to get their jobs done. I think we need to support entrepreneurship and really promote innovative thinking with all of the people who are coming into the state, who we can attract into the state with that kind of an atmosphere. I think it would definitely improve the quality of the people coming into the state looking for jobs if we had that kind of innovative thought process available to them. And finally, I identify and support economic growth sectors such as technology. I think those technology sectors really bode well for the state. We could become a technology center in the U.S. If we were to make it known to the universities across the country that we are promoting technology, promoting innovative thinking in this state.
Thank you. This next question is for the 77th District. One of the barriers to job growth is transportation and improving our transportation infrastructure. What is your position on improving our roads, bridges, and transportation infrastructure, and how do you propose we fund these efforts? Cara, Pavalock, D'Amato.
So this year you will have a transportation lockbox question on your ballot. And I think this was, some of it was, or most of it, I thought was a great idea. However, I think one of the issues with that bill was that it still gave discretion to legislators as far as what funds go in the lockbox. So basically, as one legislator put it, there's an opening, but then there's a hole in the back of it. I thought it was better. It was a good start, better than what we've had in the past. But we have a ton of different accounts that we set up that we say no sweeping from. Money is going to go into this, and it just hasn't, because we find a way, one way or another, to take money out of it. And I think we have to dedicate the funds that have from the beginning, were supposed to go in there, like the gas tax, like other funds, and make sure that they stay in there.
Thank you. Kevin Fuller.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with a lot of that. They were going to use lottery money for education. How did that work out? Not very good. They have all these other accounts that they're going to say they're all locked up and we're going to use them for these different events. They don't do it. So this lockbox for transportation is just another item on there that if that builds up big enough, they're going to take the money out of it for something. So I don't think that's going to be the best idea out there. Where are we going to get the money for transportation? There's a big problem. Like you say, they talked about the tolls. I'm not 100% against the tolls, but I want to see where they want to put them. I don't agree that they should be, say, from West Hartford to the other side of Hartford. I don't want to see that all the people that work in Hartford have to pay a toll just to get to work. I'd like to see them on the outskirts a little bit, people going up to Massachusetts or something like that. But if they do implement them, they have to take care of the gas tax. Thank you.
Thank you. So this question is for the 78th District. We didn't forget about you. Currently, in the current environment, there's a great amount of partisan rhetoric. But if elected, you're elected to serve all of the people in your district, not just the members of a particular political party. In addition, we also have to have collaboration and cooperation between municipalities and between municipalities and state government. Please explain how, as a state representative, you plan to work with all elected officials, mayors, city councils, and others in the towns you serve. First up would be Alan Marko.
In the environment we're in right now, we have become so partisan that many times you look at what is being proposed on an issue and you say, my God, we're America. We are the United States. How could we even be thinking about doing this? And I think that's one of the things that will motivate me as your legislator. I will not look at what is good for the Democrats. I will not look at what is going to give me an advantage running for re-election. I will look at what's good for all of us. And as we try to decide that, input from the people that are affected, especially the elected local municipal leaders, is highly important. Getting that input from the mayor of Bristol, the mayor of Plymouth, going and talking to the members of the boards of education so that we get the input, and then getting input from the electors, from the citizens of both Bristol and Plymouth. And so that's how I will approach this job, is doing what's best for all of us so that we can get back to being a state and a country that we are proud of.
Thank you. Whit Betts.
I've been blessed to be raised in a generation where public service was an honor, and you worked with people for the common good. And I've done this really since I was elected by example. As everybody knows, I'm politically blind in terms of I don't care whether somebody's Republican, Democrat, Independent. What's important is we have a relationship and a communication. That's why we have coffee hours, budget forums. In the past, we had written to our local officials, whether it's in Plymouth or whether it's in Bristol, before session starts. We would ask to get the entire Bristol delegation to meet with the Bristol mayor. Same thing in Plymouth, regardless of party, for the purpose of trying to find out what were the issues or priorities of the communities we represented, and then we would be collectively advocates for those. I have done that, will always continue to do that, because I consider that to be a core part of my job as well as before making an informed decision, making sure that people have an opportunity to weigh in on the different issues. So I believe I've done it by example, and I will continue to do so in the future if I'm elected.
This question is for the 77th District. The Commission on Fiscal Stability and Economic Growth issued a final report in March of 2018. Please give us your views regarding this report and the conclusions reached by their members and their recommendations. Kevin Fuller.
Well, I didn't really read that whole report. I did see some of it. I think some of it has to do with how are we going to get all this money back into the towns and cities. My opinion on a lot of that stuff is we need to focus on getting funding into our education system. We need to get money to get our kids prepared for the workforce. We have a program in our adult ed facility that trains students that are out of school to get into spring making. If we could get a grant for $100,000, that could train 60 people to get into the workforce. That would give them a job, they'd feel good about themselves, get them on the rolls of payroll. Maybe they get out and buy a car, maybe they go out and buy a house. This is what we need in our country. We need people spending money in our towns. And the only way we're going to do it is to get people trained for the workforce and not let them go on the side and forget about them.
Thank you. Cara Pavalock D'Amato.
Now, going along with what my opponent said, I agree with the workforce development, which is something that was emphasized in the report, and I'm very happy to say that actually this past session we passed the Apprenticeship Connecticut Initiative. And this initiative gives $50 million to the Department of Labor to put out an RFQ for programs from regional industry partnerships. So that way they can put together for workshop pipeline programs serving the workforce and the needs of manufacturers. So I thought that really was a big step. A couple of other things I liked about the report was the suggestion of a red tape commission to get rid of different regulations and of course all the red tape that a lot of businesses deal with. And the report suggestion about STEM and enhancement of UConn as a national research university. I thought that was great. I did think the commission glossed over the insurance industry and, also just said we need to find $1 billion more of savings. I think they also assumed, or made it sound easier as far as opening up the CBAC agreement. I think that is something difficult, and they really just gave a one-liner and said this is critical and then moved on. I know they were trying to make everybody happy and said it was a shared burden, and I tend to agree with them.
Thank you. This next question is for the 78th District. What functions, if any, currently performed by state government would be performed more effectively and efficiently if turned over to the private sector? Whit Betts.
Well, it's been demonstrated, and the trend has already begun, because the state has limited resources, because of our fiscal situation in which we have a $4.5 billion deficit over the next 2 years and $100 billion in unfunded liabilities, that we have to start making some adjustments as to what we can provide in a sustainable, dependable way. And that process began a couple of years ago in the nonprofit sector, providing social services and mental health and substance abuse. The difficulty is there was a big disparity between the pay that was given to the people in the nonprofit sector versus what was given in the public sector. And that gap remains even now. And as we move forward and transfer some of those responsibilities to the nonprofit sector, the money has not been provided to close that gap, which we definitely need, as well as the restrictions that are placed on the nonprofits. The one last part of it that makes it difficult is when we switch it over to the nonprofit sector, there will be no loss of jobs in the public sector, even if, for example, if DMV had their services provided to the private sector, you would not lose jobs if you were working at the DMV.
Thank you. Alan Marko.
Privatization has oftentimes been used as a way to get rid of unions, to take a government function where the employees are unionized and get good benefits and turn it into something where the private company is able to pay the lowest wage possible and, as Whit said, not make up the difference between the prior wage. And so a blanket attempt to privatize, I think, is the wrong approach. Instead, we should go back to looking at what are the important things we want to do and what is the mission of each department, and make sure it focuses on that. There are opportunities for partnerships, though, and partnerships in education so that they partner with manufacturing and other companies so that the training is targeted for what those companies need to have good employees. A perfect example is the DMV, that they partnered with AAA in many places in order to issue driver's licenses. Unfortunately, there was some problems with that, but I think that we need to make sure that we take advantage of opportunities like that where it can be done without costing jobs and hurting good, honest working people.
Thank you. Next question is for the 79th District. What is your position on the state government's role in providing funding for our cities and placing the burden on our municipalities that are generally well run? David Rackliffe.
Well, I think the municipalities have some restrictions in how they can raise funds, and they look to the state government for support. The state government provides a little over 25% of the revenue that's required in the municipalities, and in the last couple of years, they've been a little reticent to give all of that money to them, which creates a real problem for the municipalities to manage their day-to-day operations. I don't know that the state government has a large role in making the municipalities all by them, or making them whole. But I do think that the state government has a responsibility to provide them with a budget and a performance on the budget that is going to make those municipalities understand the revenue that they will be getting from the state is going to be predictable, and it will allow them to do their job as they need to do it.
Thank you. Chris Ziogas.
Bristol, I think, has been fortunate in terms of their share of funding. We've received what we were promised for our educational funding standard, and we were only minus a little bit of money on our municipal aid standard, as opposed to Southington and some towns around us that were measured in millions of dollars. Part of that was a governor's choice as to how he wanted to allocate some of the revenue monies allocated for the municipalities. And I will say, in my defense here, Bristol did not suffer because as a Democrat, he protected us a little bit. And he understood that towns like Bristol need that kind of help. There are other towns, Roxbury and Canaan and those such, that suffered differently from us. We are a well-organized town. I've done the Board of Finance for several years. I understand how we manage our economy in Bristol. I think the state could take a lesson from Bristol in terms of how they manage theirs. One of the recommendations of this committee, the Stabilization Committee, was that the state reorganize the way they do their budgets in terms of having one committee looking at revenues and expenses, as opposed to having two separate committees, and then trying to meld the answer at the end. Bristol has our Board of Finance. We do a good job. I think there's a lesson in that. The state gets money from the feds.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the question portion of our forum today. And now we'll move to closing statements. So we'll go in the reverse order of opening statements. So going first, 90-second closing statement, Chris Ziogas.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming and listening. I have to take issue with Dave on something that was printed in the Step Saver this week. I have been vocal on my stance on tolls. I believe that it's beneficial for the state of Connecticut. He has taken issue with me on a fact that says that we would sacrifice $600 million of federal aid if we did that program going forward. That's just not true. There have been, and you have to understand, people that are in the legislature and running the state, they're not stupid people. These are not things that go unnoticed. There has been conversations, and they have communications from the feds that say if we do the toll study the way we plan, and you do, I forgot the term now, but manage the traffic flow, then we won't sacrifice the $600 million of aid. The infrastructure program needs tolls. We need to do it going forward. We have to have a sustainable revenue source to help fund the infrastructure expansion in the state. We're close to Boston, we're close to New York, and get on the highway on any given day and you'll spend hours sitting in traffic doing nothing. We need to expand the highway opportunities for people that want to commute in and out of this state. Connecticut is going to be the home to people moving away from New York and Boston. We need to give them an opportunity to commute and have a place in Connecticut for their home.
Thank you. David Rackliff.
On November 6th, the voters of the state of Connecticut will have the opportunity to voice their approval or disapproval of the policies and direction of the majority party. My opponent is on record as favoring a tax increase to close the budget gap, tolls, and unfunded mandates on businesses. He has yet to discuss any plans to reduce spending. The responsibility of a representative is to represent the views and beliefs of his or her constituents. Has Representative Ziogas solicited the opinions of his constituents? It appears his views are not consistent with what I have been hearing, and I raise that as a distinction between us. As I have campaigned door to door in the 79th District, the overwhelming sentiment is for common sense change, for a return to the days when Connecticut was the best place to raise a family and pursue a career, and for a government with integrity as its foundation and excellence as its guiding principle. The voters want reductions in taxes, and they overwhelmingly don't want tolls. For the past 40 years, and particularly the last 8, the majority leadership has been flawed, generating spending plans that required huge tax increases and spending plans and required huge tax increases to balance them. But have they really accomplished balance? Look at the underfunded pensions, the special transportation fund that's broke, annual withholding of education and healthcare funding by the government to address shortfalls. This election comes at a critical juncture in the state's future. It's time to fix Connecticut. Let my voice be your voice in Hartford.
Alan Marko.
I mentioned earlier in my opening statement that I recently retired from teaching. And when you retire from a second career, in my case, it leads you to look back. And in looking back, one of the things I realized was that my greatest pleasure, my greatest sense of accomplishment in both my career as a teacher and in my career as an attorney was when I felt I was helping people, when I was being of service. And that is why when the opportunity arose, I decided to step up and run for legislature in the 78th District. I would like to be of service to the people of Plymouth and of Bristol and try in my small way to be part of some of the solutions. We've got some difficult problems. We are facing a lot of shortfalls in revenue, and I don't want to rain on the parade too much, but Kevin, the gas tax is kind of going away on its own because as gas mileage improves in cars, and as we switch to electric cars, that's going away. So we are going to need innovative solutions. We are going to have to look in different ways to come up with what we need to keep Connecticut running and to make it a great state for our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. Whit Betts.
Thank you. As I stated in my opening remarks, this year's election is a report card on the job performance of Governor Lavoie and the Democratic majority who have been in charge for 8 consecutive years. If you feel that you are better off now, 8 years ago, than you were 8 years ago, you should vote for all of the liberal Democratic candidates who are running. If you feel tolls will not harm you financially or be an inconvenience, then please vote for the supporters of Governor Lavoie. And also keep in mind there is an alternative to tolls. It's a bonding plan that was promoted and talked about in detail in the legislature by the Republicans. However, I doubt many individuals and companies feel this way, after hearing how Connecticut compares to other states in the country. Here are just 3 examples. Connecticut finances rank 3rd worst in the nation. Connecticut is the 5th worst state to retire in 2018, and Connecticut is ranked 46th in adding jobs since the Great Recession. For many of us, Connecticut can and must do better. I ask for your vote on November 6th. Please give me and my fellow Republicans the opportunity to fix Connecticut.
Thank you. Cara, Pavalock, Tomato.
First, I want to thank the Chamber and St. Paul for hosting this event. I'd also like to thank our veterans, small business owners, working families, and community organizations that really are the backbone and the heart of this city. Now, I'm used to being the token female, whether that's in bankruptcy court or tax court, and once again as the only female candidate running in Bristol for the legislature. But I pride myself in not only representing women and mothers, but also business owners and employees just trying to put food on the table. I've maintained our education funding and fought for change, but we're facing another $5 billion deficit because of bailouts and freebies. It's time to fix Connecticut. We all love this city, but I believe my dedication to public service, my respect for the Constitution, and my love for this country will give voters the confidence that they need to elect me once again for another term. And with that, I ask for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Fuller.
Thank you. I would again like to thank the Chamber for hosting this forum. You as a voter need to decide on what type of representation you are looking for. If it's someone that is all about training our youth to get back into the workforce and feel positive about the future, that would be me. If you want someone that supports equal pay for equal work, that would be me. If you want a representative that is willing to work with any party that wants to get the job done, I am the one. We need to make small businesses be able to thrive again by stopping all the taxes on them. We need to look at the business entity tax. We need to look at the car tax and see how we can either reduce or eliminate them. As I said before, we need to stop acting like the 53rd state in the country. We need to support our technical schools, and we must not vote to cut funding to our colleges and our universities. And lastly, as a state representative, you need someone that is focused on making sure we get the funds and services for our city. That is by strong communication with the mayor and superintendent of schools, so we are aware of the needs of our residents of Bristol. I will make sure as your representative that I have this open communication and will support the will of the Bristol residents. This is why I ask for your support on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for all 6 of our candidates. Thank you. We're going to take a short break to set up for the Senate part of the forum. I'm sure the candidates will be available to ask any specific questions that you may have of them. So we'll take a short 10 or 15 minute break just to change the stage around. So thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And please join me in welcoming Henri Martin and Christopher Wright to our State Senate Forum. The format for this forum is that each candidate will be given an opportunity to give you a 90-second opening statement. We have 4 questions prepared, and each candidate will answer each question. And then we will have a 90-second closing statement. Once again, there are timers located and microphones on your table. The timer will start with a green light. At 30 seconds, the light will turn yellow. And when that light turns red, you will be thanked and we will move on. So first, we'll start with Henri Martin with an opening statement. Henri?
Thank you. The Independent Commission on Fiscal Stability and Economic Growth said, and I quote, "Connecticut's fiscal stability has deteriorated to crisis levels. State spending is more than the money coming in. The amount we must pay for debt and unfunded pensions takes money away from education, transportation, and programs for the elderly and the disabled. And unnecessary regulations and high taxes increase the cost of doing business in Connecticut. Because of this, economic indicators show Connecticut with the weakest economy in the country. This problem has really been growing for years. My Democrat colleagues have dominated the legislature for decades with their policies. I'm fed up with the bad decisions and bad policies like the outrageous expensive busway, the bailing out of Hartford, and the lucrative CBAC agreement. And in 2 weeks, we can put a stop to this downward spiral. It's time that we fix Connecticut.
Thank you. Christopher Wright.
My name is Christopher Wright. I am Bristol born and raised. As some of you know, I have a degree in economics from Central Connecticut State University. I've worked for the FDIC for 8 years, and I've also attended seminary, studying for the ministry. The theme of my life has always been service to others. That's why I attended seminary. That's why I ran for the first time for the legislature 10 years ago. And I want to be there to work for you. When I was a member of the legislature, I was a member of the Moderate Democratic Caucus, and I would not be afraid to vote against my leadership if I thought it was the right thing to do. I voted against 2 out of the 3 two-year budgets while I was there. Now, I've shown my independence. In the last 2 years, Henri Martin has cast 867 votes in the Connecticut State Legislature. 856 have been with his leadership, which is 99%. He has a total of a 98% voting record with his leadership in his 4 years in the legislature. That makes me question, is he there really to represent the people of the 31st District, or is he there to represent the Republican leadership of the state Senate? I have proven my independence by voting against my leadership. I will be there to work for you when I get elected and get sworn in come January.
Thank you. Our first question, we'll ask Christopher Wright to answer this question first. As we know, the state is in a fiscal crisis. What would you propose to eliminate the multi-billion-dollar deficits in the fiscal year 2019-2020 and fiscal year 2020-21 budgets? So in other words, how would you eliminate those multi-billion-dollar deficits?
The deficit is a complicated issue. I don't think that there's any one answer that you can get out of it. I don't think that you could do it through taxes. That's why, as a Democrat, as a member of the House, I voted against those 2-year budgets. I also don't think that you can really do it just through cutting either, because that has associated costs with it. You're going to cut education, you're going to cut transportation. What are you going to cut? I think you've got to work at growing the budget. And I think that a couple of ways to do that, 2 avenues. One, that we can work on quickly is manufacturing. I think that it was a good idea for the community college systems to shift to a more technical vocational curriculum. I think that those are jobs that kids coming out of high school can get quickly. They can even get them while they're going to school and be part of the workforce and earning a salary right away. The second would be financial services. Between the insurance companies based in Hartford and even the hedge funds based in the Greenwich area, they employ tens of thousands of people in the state of Connecticut, and they bring in billions of dollars in revenue, which is one reason why I don't support raising the income tax, why I have not supported it and voted against it, because we need to keep those groups here, and that's what I would do.
Thank you. Henri Martin.
Thank you. So the Fiscal Stability and Economic Growth Commission, in their report, make comments or make reference to cutting $1 billion right off through government efficiencies. They went outside themselves, hired a consulting firm to give them that information. So part of that, their recommendations is to find $1 billion in cuts. And if you do the math on that, it's about 5% of our budget. So I think that is very achievable. I think another area that we need to cut our expenditures is the bonding. So, when Governor Lavoie first took office, it began at he came in and the bonding amount was $1.7 billion annually. It got up to $2.7 billion until recently through the bipartisan budget that we adopted 2 years ago, we've managed to get that down to 1.9. And even still, I believe there's further cuts into there. As an example, there's a line item in there for governors' discretionary bonding. In other words, they're political handouts that he can give throughout the whole state of Connecticut to whomever he'd like.
Thank you. Our second question, and Henri Martin will go first. Rising health care cost ranks as a top priority for Connecticut residents in this election. Health care costs continue to rise, although the rate of growth has slowed. Higher costs affect everyone, individuals, businesses, and government. The share of health care costs paid by employees is climbing as businesses attempt to manage those increases. In 2018, employees paid for 44% of health care costs, up 10% from 2018. What proposals do you have to address rising health care costs, and why do you support them?
Well, that's a big question because it's a big problem. I think that affects so many different households as to how do you pay for it, and being an employer and being on that side of the formula or the equation, so to speak, is like, okay, how do I control my expenditures if I want to pay for the healthcare costs of my employees, and vice versa, being the employee having to dish out, $2,000 a year just on deductibles, or $4,000 for some. I don't know if I've got the right answer for that. I think there are much smarter individuals, and I'll be honest with you, that are out there that understand all the dynamics of that, and particularly the insurance companies who deal with this on a regular basis. Is universal health care the answer? I don't think so, because it's supply and demand, and you start putting restrictions on doctors, and we're only going to pay you this. Then you start discouraging individuals or doctors from being doctors, and now you start increasing the wait time because you have a lack of doctors for getting an appointment. So I don't know if that universal health care is the answer, but...
Okay, thank you. Christopher Wright.
In my job at St. Francis, I am responsible for collecting people's insurance information, and I can say that since the start of Obamacare, I have seen a noticeable drop in the number of people who have no insurance. They either buy it through the exchange, or we have in Connecticut had an increase in Medicaid. Now, the decrease that you talk of in the rate of growth of healthcare costs, if you look at it year by year, it's pretty much directly associated with the start of Obamacare that has actually decreased the rate of growth in healthcare. And I think one reason is because more people are being covered, means less people or fewer people are using emergency rooms, which are tremendously expensive, and that is a key to lowering costs. Another key is, I know that companies want to lower their healthcare costs. I got a call just this week from somebody whose wife works at Bristol Hospital, and because his employer offered insurance, he was being dropped from his wife's insurance policy at Bristol Hospital, and he was rather upset about that. But that's some of the decisions that that companies are making in order to cut their costs. Maybe we do need to look at some kind of overall rules.
Thank you. Our next question, and Christopher Wright will go first. One of the barriers to job growth is transportation and improving our transportation infrastructure. What's your position on improving our roads, bridges, and transportation infrastructure, and how do you propose we fund these efforts?
Well, I'm somebody who, I'm not necessarily opposed to the inclusion of tolls. Now, if you look at the commission report, it calls for the inclusion of tolls. It also calls for, in addition to that, an increase in the gas tax of a minimum of 7 cents. Now, that I'm not so sure about. If I do vote for tolls, I would want to do that in conjunction with a decrease in the gas tax, not an increase in it. But ultimately, it's the funds, because it takes money to build roads and bridges, and it takes money to keep them updated. We do have the vote coming up in 2 weeks on creating a lockbox for the funds going into the Special Transportation Fund. I'm not necessarily opposed to that. I always thought that it should be up to the legislature. They should have enough responsibility to not raid the funds, which is, again, one of the reasons why I often voted no on the budget, because we were doing things like that, and I didn't approve of it. So if we do that, it would be in the Constitution, then we would create that, and that would help in providing the funds necessary to keep our roads and bridges maintained.
Thank you. Henri Martin.
The answer is really with the Republican plan, the prioritizing progress. That is the answer. We under the cap, the 1.9 billion that we now have statutorily, we take allocations that are standard bonding that we do for school construction, through monies to the municipalities, LoSEP, STEEP. All of those are accounted for, including Yukon, 200 million for Yukon, for the Board of Regents. That is all under bonding. What's left, once those allocations are distributed, it's $1.3 billion of allocations. We are left with $700 million for our roads, our bridges, and our railways. On top of, we also would be bonding $750 million with the special obligation bonds as well. So there's $1.4 billion there, and when we leverage the money with the federal government, it's another $675 billion, or million dollars. That gives us $2 billion a year to repair our roads, our bridges, and our railways without raising money or raising taxes through tolls.
Thank you. I'm going to ask this question again. It's the same question that we asked our state reps. And the reason why I'm going to ask it is that this year, what we did is we asked the public to comment, and we asked the public to send us their questions, and we got questions from business leaders, we got questions from members of our Legislative Action Committee, and we got questions from the public. And this question was submitted a couple of different times, and I think it really reflects what our citizens are looking for in their leaders. So the question I'm going to ask the both of you is the question on partisan rhetoric. If elected, you're elected to serve all of the people in your district, not just your political party. In addition, we need to have collaboration and cooperation between municipalities and state governments. Please explain how you plan to work with all the elected officials, mayors, council members, Board of Educations, and others in the towns that you'll serve. Henri Martin.
Well, I think my past 4 years, I've had real good relationships with each of the community leaders, starting with Mayor Merchant in Plymouth, as well as Mayor Edmond in Terryville, in Harwinton, and Mike Chris in Harwinton, and moving along to town manager in Plainville, Robert Lee, and their first chair, Kathy Puglisi. And currently, with previous Mayor Ken Colkane, and currently with the current mayor, I have a hard time with because of whatever it is. But at the Capitol, I'll tell you this: that I think we agree more than we disagree. I know you hear all this in the newspapers, or you read about it, but I'll tell you this: 90% of the time, we agree on most of the statutes. And it's the other maybe 10% or maybe 5% of the time we're ironing stuff out. So there is bipartisan agreement in a lot of the bills that we go through, and between the chairs, and we have to negotiate, and sometimes it's not exactly what we want, but there is some horse trading that takes place in order to create the statutes. So I think I wouldn't change anything that I'm doing.
Thank you. Christopher Wright.
I think this is an issue where Henry and I separate. When I was in the state legislature and Ken Cockane was elected mayor of Bristol, I called Ken. I made an appointment with Ken. I went into the office and I sat down and I talked with him about issues that were going on in the legislature that affected Bristol. Mayor Ellen Zappo has yet to hear from Henri Martin in the year that she's been in office. She has not received one phone call from him. She has not received one email from him. She has received no communication from him whatsoever. That, I think, is a big difference. I'm elected to serve the people of the 31st District. And whether that's going to be a Republican like Mayor Merchant or a Democrat like Mayor Zappo-Sassu here in Bristol, my job is to work with them to do what's best for the people of the district. I'm not going to just ignore the mayor of my hometown just because that mayor is from a different party than I am. I did that when Ken was there. I made the effort to reach out to him and to talk to him. I'm sorry that Henri has not done the same thing, but that is what I would do as your state senator, and that's why I'm running for this office.
Thank you. Well, folks, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule, so hopefully, candidates, would you mind if I added a fifth question? Would you mind if I added a fifth question? Great, so let's do that. Question, we'll have Christopher Wright start with this question. Should you be elected, what do you believe are the top 3 priorities for the state legislature in the 2019-2020 session?
Clearly, the economy and the budget are going to be the first priority. We have to get our budget straightened out in order to attract businesses here, to get the economy moving again. And then we also have to get the economy moving again to help bring in the revenue that's needed to get the budget balance. I've already mentioned 2 of the avenues that I think we would use to do that. One is manufacturing. In Bristol alone, there are over 6,200 people who make their living in manufacturing. It's clearly the largest section of our economy here in Bristol, and we need to work on that. I also mentioned financial services. A third that I would mention would be biotech and medical research. I think Connecticut scored a huge win when we got the Jackson Labs to move next door to Farmington. I think that has great potential in the future. I think another issue is education. We have to make sure that Connecticut stays at the top, or I think one of the top 5 or 6 states in educating our young people as they're coming out of high school, and we need to maintain that. Third would be healthcare. You can't have a good, solid workforce if they're not healthy, because they're not receiving the healthcare that they need. And it's tough for them to do that if they don't have health insurance or access to healthcare. I think those are my 3 top priorities.
Thank you. Henri Martin.
I'll try to keep it short. Stabilize the state's finances, first and foremost. Nothing happens without us addressing that. Second, support workforce development, particularly the private sector, matching it with the public sector. In other words, a partnership. Reform education to match the private sector needs with the education that is required to fill those jobs. We have 13,000 jobs immediately in advanced manufacturing today. Projected within 5 to 10 years, it's 27,000. And I haven't even talked or mentioned the trades, the jobs that are required in the trades, the medical industry, the engineering industry. And thirdly, I would create an the economic climate that encourages investments by our business communities, which would reduce regulatory mandates on them, and then conduct a thorough review of every agency and assets to justify the existence of our government.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now move on to our closing statements. 90-second closing statement. Going first will be Christopher Wright.
I want to thank the Chamber for having us here. I think that these are a wonderful avenue for people to hear the candidates, hear us side by side. I only wish we had perhaps more time. I just want to reiterate my reason for running. I think that the people of the 31st District deserve a senator who is going to be there for them, who is going to be working for them, and who will be working with all of the municipal leaders and not just the ones of their party. I think I have proven during my time in the legislature that I'm willing to do that. I think that that I've really shown that. I think that if you vote for me, you will get the leadership that you need and you deserve, and we can do better. We can do better in Connecticut. Connecticut's a wonderful state, but we need to move forward. I will be the person who will be there to move us forward into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Henri Martin.
My Democratic friends in Hartford have dominated the legislature with their policies and spending 40 of the last 42 years. They have abused their majority position, pursued unpopular taxes and tax increases, spent far beyond what taxpayers could afford, and have run Connecticut's economy into the ground. People and businesses are leaving our state. Economic growth lags behind the rest of our country. My friends, the empirical data shows the states with higher economic growth are those with less government spending and lower taxes are the ones who attract the people, the businesses, and the jobs. In order to move Connecticut in that direction, it will require citizens to elect leaders who recognize that stabilizing the state budget, reducing spending, reducing the size of government, and reducing regulations must be the priority. If you elect me as your state senator, I will work with other elected leaders to clean up our past mistakes and refocus our state government on things that matter most: economic growth, long-term job creation, and fiscal stability. That is why I'm running for state senate, and I'm asking you for your vote on November 6th.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our state senate candidate in the 31st district. And ladies and gentlemen, again, another thank you to Chris Boyle for his flawless timekeeping this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the President and CEO of the Central Connecticut Chambers of Commerce, Cindy Bombard.
I won't keep you because I know we all want to go see those Red Sox play, but thank you, Paul, Kurt, and Chris, for everything you do to make our forums so smoothly. I couldn't do it without you. We have an awesome legislative committee out of the Central Connecticut Chambers of Commerce. And I also want to thank Carrie DuPont for allowing us to use St. Paul's High School. It is a beautiful venue for this. Carrie, thank you so much. And to all of the candidates this evening, I want to thank you for your gift of time and your offer to serve the community. Civic engagement is so important to each of us. Volunteering yourself, stepping forward to serve the community for the betterment of Bristol and the state of Connecticut is commendable. On behalf of the Central Connecticut Chambers of Commerce and those that are here today, we thank you. It is not an easy job, and each of you have stepped up to the challenge, and I thank you for that. And again, this will be aired on Nutmeg Television on your program that you came in. All of the dates and times are on there. Our Chamber of Commerce is located at 440 North Main Street. I have 7 employees, 2 are here today. We pump out a lot of work out of there. We are involved and engaged in 7 chambers of commerces and 2 manufacturing associations. I love the fact that all of the candidates today talked about workforce, manufacturing, education, because that is one of our forefront areas of our Chamber of Commerce and many chambers around the state of Connecticut, because there is a true lack of workforce for our awesome companies that are out there. Bristol is very fortunate to have many, many wonderful companies. And between the city of Bristol, its council, the mayor, myself, our state reps, we visit them weekly to see what their needs are. It's a part of my job, it's a part of my passion. So again, go home, drive careful, and thank you for attending.